I'm Becky Fawcett, a mom by adoption, an infertile blonde, a female founder, and a businesswoman. Podcast rulebooks will say your introduction must always be the same for every episode. I don't like when people say you have to do things their way. I am an entrepreneur. I've always done things my way. People said it doesn't always have to be the Becky way, but sometimes it is, because last time I checked, I'm Becky. So at any rate, why would I think having children would have been any different? So there's my big plot twist. I couldn't have kids, and there was the road that presented itself. Who would have ever thought that my whole career and my whole future would be based on the fact that I wasn't like everybody else and that I wasn't perfect? And that brings us to my episode today for the Fawcett Report. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to talk about navigating failure, especially when it's public failure, because I think this is a word that scares people so much. I know I grew up thinking that failure meant you were weak, instead of looking at it as failure takes you somewhere different. Failure can be a pivot. Failure can be a learning experience. And in my case, failure can send you in the direction you should have found for yourself, but you never were going to. When I got pregnant, I think just before 33, it was my first round of IVF. Starting that was a huge issue because I had to face the fact that I wasn't getting pregnant on my own. And as a lot of people wanted to point out to me back then, it was really lovely. I'm really grateful they all wanted to say this to me, but they said, your body has failed you. Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. But yeah, I guess my body failed me and ended up at IVF, and I got pregnant first round. And I remember sitting there with the pregnancy test and my doctor, and the first thought through my head, and my girls know this, so don't even come at me and tell me this is a horrible thing to say, because it's just being transparent. First thing I thought was, oh my God, I dodged that bullet. It was going to be like everybody else. When I was pregnant at the 12-week mark, you think you're in the safe zone. And so I started telling people. I also, after everything I'd been through, started eating everything in sight, and I gained a significant amount of weight in the 12 weeks. And people started saying this to me. Oh, I'm so glad you're having a baby. I thought that your career was more important and you just weren't going to have a child. Oh, that's nice. Someone else said, I'm so glad to see you're pregnant because I thought you cared more about being a size 4 than having a child. I hate to break it to you, I was a size 2 back then, but no, I didn't really care about what size I was. I'd been struggling to have a kid for, at that point, almost 3 years. It was awful, what people said to me. And they thought, we thought you didn't want to give up sushi and drinking. Are you kidding? Who says this to people? But at any rate, that is what people were saying to my face. So I can only imagine what they were saying behind my back. I mean, that must have been real, really good. Then what happens? Because you're probably listening to this thinking, what the hell is she talking about? Failure and public failure. Then at 16 weeks, the unthinkable happened. And I went to a doctor's appointment without my husband because I thought it was routine, and it was nothing routine about it. There was no heartbeat. It was over. And I experienced that moment alone in a room with a stranger, the nurse technician. And that was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. It wasn't even at my infertility office with all those kind people who had taken care of me and countless others for months and years as we tried to become parents. And then I had to tell the world at 16 weeks. And I had a very public job. I'd been director of marketing at Philadelphia Magazine. And then for the last, I don't know how many years there, I'd been publicist. I had my own PR firm. And I remember sending out an email to 250 people telling them what happened. And I knew I couldn't even cover the ground fast enough. I'll never forget it. I mean, I'll just never forget it. I would have to walk into meetings and be faced with someone who hadn't heard the bad news. They'd heard the good news and they wanted to talk to me about it, but they hadn't heard the bad news. It was awful. I think it was probably worse for the person who said something to me because I had to tell them I had a miscarriage at 16 weeks. And it's just, I don't know, it changes you. And then once that cat's out of the bag, now everybody knew I was doing IVF. There was no privacy. Are you going to do it again? Are you going to try to get pregnant again? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? It was pretty bad. I went on to have 2 more miscarriages. I don't think many people knew because I just stopped talking about it. I didn't want to go there with people. I needed to just put my head down and get through this. And then after the last miscarriage, I moved on to adoption. That is the road that I should have found for myself, but it found me. And I'm pretty grateful for that. How the public failure of all the miscarriages and everything, it also made me really look at my career, to be honest with you, because I used to be so worried about being perfect and achieving and not failing. And even if I wasn't perfect, letting everybody think I was perfect. And I worked pretty hard at that. And I'd say I was pretty good at it, to be honest with you. And I so worried about what other people thought. I thought, if I can succeed here, if I can accomplish this, then people will know I'm worthy. People will know I'm accomplished. I thought it was important. And then becoming a mom became the only thing that I actually really cared about. And put everything into that. And Jane was placed in my arms in October 2005. And my world changed. That was it. My world changed. All I could think about was, what if I hadn't had the opportunity to adopt? What if I hadn't had the money? What if I hadn't been willing to check all my fears at the door? What if I had missed out on this because I was too scared to try and too scared to fail? I wouldn't have been a mom. And then all I could focus on was helping other people because I knew how lucky and fortunate I had been to have this opportunity to do both IVF and adopt my first child on my terms, no one else's, mine. So it prepped me, all this public failure, in ways that I don't think Harvard Business School could have done. And let's be honest, I wasn't getting into Harvard Business School. Maybe now I could, but back then I was not. I decided to create helpusadopt.org. And I remember writing the business plan. I remember knowing pretty immediately that it was good, which again, women aren't really allowed to say that. We're allowed to say we're good at tennis, but we are certainly not allowed to say we are really good at writing business plans. But I was, and I am, and I used to be good at tennis too. So that's a whole nother podcast. But when I had to take the real step for Help Us Adopt, it wasn't opening the bank account. It wasn't asking my friend to create the logo. It wasn't coming up with the name. It wasn't setting up all the back office, which I did. It was sending out the letter in June, the friends and family letter, the launch announcement letter. Because if this didn't work, I was risking the greatest public failure of my life because I was starting something huge and risking it all. And don't think I didn't pause. I paused. I really paused. I read that letter. I had friends read that letter. I built my mailing list. It was 600 letters going out. And once I did that, everyone would be watching. What's that little blonde girl going to do next? That was a pretty scary moment. But I decided that at that point, I didn't really care because I really believed in this idea. I knew I had something good. And I knew the reason I knew it was so good was that it wasn't a copycat organization. It was something new. It was a new approach to an adoption grant program. And mine was a new face of adoption and a new voice in the adoption world. And I felt really good about everything that I had mapped out. And here we are 18 years later. So there's that. However, it's pretty interesting when you're an entrepreneur and you're doing something like this that puts you in front of people and they're watching. Can she do it? Can she do it? Can she do it? What's really remarkable is when you start to realize that your brain as an entrepreneur does not work the same way as most people's. My brother, I have 3 brothers, but the oldest one, I'm the oldest child. He's next in line. He used to tell people, and he is very by the book, follows the rules, corporate jobs, so successful, but he follows the path. And I remember he just would look at me and say, I don't know how you can jump with no net. It never crossed my mind that I was jumping with no net. It's just how I'm wired. I saw a need. I figured I could fix that, solve that problem, and create something that would fill that need. So I did it. And he kept saying, most people can't jump without a net. Most people can't even jump with a net. I never really understood what he meant, to be honest with you, because for me, it was such second nature to just jump. I didn't really think too much about it. I mean, listen, it was a calculated risk. I wasn't like waking up one day thinking I could run the New York City Marathon by lunch. It was a well thought out process. Listen, I had years of infertility to think about all of this and how was this going to look? And I did research before I wrote that business plan. And all my jobs, every job I ever had led me to this road. But when you're dealing with people who don't have an entrepreneurial brain, you scare them. What is that? I mean, I don't even know. When people say I scare them, I laugh because look at me. How scary am I? But it scares them. And they start to put their fear of failure on you. And one of the things that I have noticed along my 18 years of Help Us Adopt, and most, to be honest with you, in the last few years, because I took some leaps of faith with this organization, they paid off. Boy, did they scare people. And I realized that so many people have the what if it fails mentality before you're even out of the gate. Seriously. And say, what if we did this? How does this look? This is what it would get us. We could help this many more people. And the overwhelming response was, what if it fails? We're not going to do that because what if it fails? And I said, we haven't even tried. How can you say that if we haven't even tried? Or quite frankly, if I haven't tried, because I'm the one out there risking public failure. And I pushed through and we did it because I believe. And I don't do things that I don't believe in, but I believe. And I always want to sit back and say, what about my career history? I mean, I've been working a long time, 30 years. What about my career history shows you that I might fail, that this is going to fail, that I can't do it? And the thing about failure that I've learned along the way is that it doesn't show you're weak. It shows you're so brave. You're so brave. That scares people too. They're not willing to try. The thing about failure is you don't always hit it out of the park on the first try. You just don't. It's impossible. But it doesn't mean that your first try of something doesn't get you to a certain point. And from that point, if you see it's not working, you redirect, you pause, you put it on hold, you think about it, and you reframe it. And then you get where you need to go. And sometimes the first one hits, but it's a small thing. But failure, I don't know, it doesn't scare me anymore because we're blazing a new road. There's no map to follow. It's just my entrepreneurial brain. And again, that scares people. The failure that I worry about these days is when I read grant applications and I know we don't have enough money to help everybody. So that's a different kind of failure. That's something I put on myself. But that's what drives me to be better, is letting other people down, is I haven't provided a big enough solution to help as many people that need it to complete their adoption, to bring their kids home. I'm not scared of failing anymore. And I certainly don't mind doing it in public because the other thing I know about my work and the guts I have and bravery I have and show every day is that someone else is watching me and they're getting ready to do something big. And I hope that all my risk taking, that all my public failures, my good ideas and my sometimes not the best ideas, but you know what? It's all taking us forward. And I hope that inspires someone else to risk public failure for something that they think is important. And the other thing that I want to say is that I'm still here. I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I can still walk down the street. And the only people who are talking about that in a negative way are the people who think, what if it fails? I'm not willing to try. I'm raising two girls in New York City, Jane and Brooke, 16 and 20 years old. And I tell them anything's possible. They worry about failure because the world tells you that's a bad thing. Their mother says, let's go do it. So that is my podcast for today. I'm sure those listening will tell me I've lost my mind because it's made them uncomfortable. Too bad. I'm so grateful to have gotten over my fear of failing. I'm not done. I'm sure I'll have something else along the road that people snicker at behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, I know what I've built. I know where I'm going. I'm willing to take that risk. Thank you so much for listening to the Fawcett Report today. I'm so glad you were here, and here's to seeing the world a little differently and possibly using your voice to make a difference, even if it's not perfect first time out. You can follow the Fawcett Report on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and you can message me on Instagram or Facebook. I will respond as long as you aren't mean, because I just don't do mean. If you want to tell me your stories of failure, I want to hear them. If you want to tell me what you're afraid of failing at, I want to hear that too, because I'll tell you it can be done. So, if you're curious about my adoption advocacy and family building work through helpusadopt.org, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, as well as the website. And I will see you next time.